Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot here today to give you all a 2-for-1 special. We are discussing episode 9 and 10 of Y: The Last Man. We're breaking down those episodes. We're talking about the season as a whole, the highs and the lows, and of course, just giving you guys a little bit more insight on the cancellation on FX on Hulu and where this show can potentially land. We're breaking it all down here in this spoiler review, but before we do so, make sure you're checking me out on all my other social media accounts. If you all are new to the channel, well, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. If you all enjoyed this spoiler review of Y: The Last Man, well, make sure to like and share the review. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate the support. And in those comments, let's discuss this season finale, potentially series finale. Let's talk about your general thoughts on the season as a whole. What were some things that really worked for you? What were things that didn't work? For those that have read the graphic novel, what did you feel about the adaptation? And of course, where do you hope to see this show land if there were to be a season 2 on another platform? Let's talk about it in the comments below. So just quickly, I wasn't able to review episode 9 last week. Your boy was slightly under the weather, didn't shoot any videos for a couple days, but now I am back. I watched episode 9 and 10 back to back, which was the first time for me this whole season, because I was watching the show like week to week as you were guys were. So it was a different experience watching the episodes back to back. We'll talk about that as well. So again, we'll be slightly briefly going over episode 9, just my general take. And then of course, we're breaking down the finale. And then of course, we're going to dive deeper into a discussion about this series as a whole. So with that being said, we're talking spoilers. Episode 9, which was titled Peppers. And I'm not going to lie, as far as a second to last episode goes, I wasn't the biggest fan of that episode, which premiered last week and I saw recently. It's just so much going on. This is the first time that I can remember. This is the first time in the show where we have all of our main storylines going on in the same place. And whenever we would transition to the stuff at the Pentagon, to obviously stuff with Roxanne, and then obviously stuff with York, it just didn't mesh well to me. But we'll get into it here. Again, I know we're backtracking for last week, but let me know how you all felt about last week's episode before we break down the finale. But let's talk about it. Episode 9, we open with York, Allison, and 355 as they continue to fit in with the neighborhood. And right off the bat, with them dancing the 50 Cent and TLC, I'm just like, man, this show has went downhill pretty quickly. So I was almost checked out pretty early on, but there were moments in the episode that I didn't enjoy. But meantime, when this is going on, the daughters of the Amazons attack this kind of group that are grieving for men. And I thought this was another moment. I'm just like, this show is just kind of losing me as far as just like common sense. The Amazonian warriors, they are there to take the food, take over this camp, but instead they destroy resources they could have traded, which nowhere points out in this episode. So they destroy food and water. I'm like, you guys were just starving a week ago. Like, I guess their starvation has lost, their minds have went completely off the rails. They don't know how to make any sense of like destroying resources. But I'm just like, this is extremely stupid. But I will say, at least the show with the Nora character, at least she acknowledges that they're being extremely stupid, but still at the same time, it's just like her making that decision to blow up the grocery store a couple weeks ago. It's just like these characters are just making some really irrational decisions. But let's go back to stuff. And again, we're focusing on three plots for the first time this season. We go to the Pentagon, and this is where Kim and Regina, they make their move to have Regina become the next president. And this is where we see President Brown, or I should say ex-President Brown, or what's the status of her right now, right? But anyway, we see Jennifer Brown. She admits to everyone about York, about the mission and all that different stuff. But while she's confessing, this is where Jess and her team infiltrate the Pentagon and go under attack. And this is where we see a bunch of chaos happening. But more importantly, Regina's potential president for temporary purposes until they figure all out the voting system and all that, she's killed. One of the lead women of that group shoots her in the head after she told her to be quiet, but she just kept talking, gets shot in the head, leaving her off the table. And I'm not gonna lie, I was wishing it was a 2-shot. I wish it was one for Regina and one for the Kim character, which we'll talk about here in a second. But she's killed. She's no longer a part of the mix. But speaking of the mix, this is where I felt the episode, well, right off the bat, I mentioned the TLC dancing and the illogical decisions, but the meshing of the three plots. We're transitioning to this chaotic stuff at the Pentagon, and then we go back to the Utopia area, and this is where 355 and Allison are talking about Allison having sex while we're getting some backstory of 355 and Fran, and she destroys her tracker. I'm just like, this is just the pacing and the juxtaposition of what's going on here to there. It just did not mesh well for me personally. It's just like, okay, we're going from this kind of high obtained, tense-filled moment to this kind of silly dancing, I'm going to have sex with Dominique and the tracker and the backstory. It was just too much going on at once. I felt like all this stuff could have happened weeks ago, in my personal opinion. But back to the recap, it's again chaos at the Pentagon. We see that everyone's split up, everyone's shooting one another. We see Kim protects Christine, which again, that plot has just kind of went nowhere and just has been really shallow in my opinion. Like I get what they're doing with Kim, her whole thing of having kids back and wanting, men back to reproduce and all that, but I just feel like it wasn't developed enough for her to, kill this random woman that was not a fan of hers. But I thought that scene was a little bit silly. Wrapping things up, we see that Roxanne and Nora are butting heads as they've been doing all season, but they come into an agreement once that Nora finds out that there's like this safe haven, which we know that's where York's at, and her and Roxanne decide we got to kill all the men, we got to kill this York guy, they know where he is, and we see that they want to just kill off all the men, and we end with even Jess finding out that York was alive. So, like I said, as an episode goes, the second to last episode, I wasn't really excited for the finale because this is, if you watch my reviews, I haven't read the graphic novel, but it was pretty much telegraphed the whole season as far as how things were going to shape up, and it pretty much played out exactly how I said. And weeks ago, like literally episode 2 or 3, I was like, York and Hero are going to come across each other. Hero's going to choose to go with Roxanne, and I predicted all this stuff, so it wasn't really like a good build-up for me personally. And like I said, as far as an episode, it was just too much going on, and it just didn't mesh well, and I just didn't really care what was going on in episode 9. But we're going to talk about episode 10 again. Let me know your pros and cons of episode 9, but more importantly, let's talk about this finale here, which was titled Victoria, which we find out what that means later bit on. But we open the episode, which I'm just like, this is a very interesting way to open up an episode in a negative way. We open up with a flashback with showing York with his, shaved face. We see Hero, we see the whole family there, and we open episode with a joke by Hero referring to York's being a white man in the world. I'm just like, this is the show, and we'll get to my overall thoughts of the show, but this is just a perfect example how the show is so focused on its themes and its kind of message versus like an actual story. And I just feel like that message of the women ruling the world don't need man, we do need man, the conflict there, and the message of just kind of that narrative just overshadowed character development, pacing, just what makes good characters is kind of lacking the show because it was so focused on just like beating you over the head with the message of the show, which I think kind of overshadowed some of the good things that the show could have offered. But back to the recap, when we're getting all this stuff, we see 355, she and York plan to leave, and obviously they're going to have Allison go with them, and at this point we cut back to Roxanne and Hero, who learns the news that her mom has recently died, thinking, obviously, she hears the president's dead, and she doesn't know the whole thing about Regina, so she's like, oh, my mom's dead, and we cut back and forth to these flashbacks, which I don't think we needed as many flashbacks in this episode because we, as an audience, at least I'll just speak for myself, I already knew that there was tension between the family, that there was tension between Hero and her mom and her dad, and apparently with York, just because, she's a woman, and he was the golden child, and he seemed to have more things and going in the works, more than his sister. I just felt like it was just a huge disconnect to keep throwing those flashbacks that already told us, we didn't need that context. It was already kind of explicitly said in weeks ago. So I just thought that those flashbacks were completely unnecessary. But we see that President Brown, and you talk about unnecessary and just kind of magical things happen in this show, unlogical things. Sam, who last time we saw him, he was talking to that teacher in episode 8, which I don't know what the meaning of that scene was. Again, it was very mysterious when he saw that teacher and she was playing the song and dancing or singing to the song, and it's just like, anyway, Sam has been following Brown this whole time, and he's there to warn her and warn the other person that's there with President Brown that someone's been watching them, and we see that they get captured, and we'll talk about who's that group that captured them. We cut to 355 and Allison. They don't I don't know if they're alluding to them having sex, but at least they slept together. And we knew this weeks ago when Allison and 355 were in the prison cell and they got all close. And I don't feel like that relationship was much at all developed, and it kind of came out of left field. I mean, they hinted at it, but I don't think it was handled that well, in my opinion. At the same time, we see that York hooks up with that Sonia girl, and it just, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling the episode. I don't feel like these characters have been well developed. Speaking of underdeveloped, we see that Fran is still tracking 335 after she destroyed the tracker last week. She now has a new tracker in front of her, showing that she's been following her and keeping an eye on her, keeping tabs on her this entire season. We get the discussion here, and we got to talk about this scene, ladies and gentlemen. We get this scene, and you talk about unnecessary. We see Kim has a wet dream about York, and literally, like, her nipples are leaking with milk, and they have sex, and she wakes up, and she's like, Christine, York's the future, which, again, her whole plot this season is to have kids, to have more kids, to reproduce, to have more children, to continue on with the world, which, listen, the Kim character is a Karen of the show, and the show has really showed you its political hand in regards to what side of the line they lie on. They really made a certain particular group in the politics look a certain way versus another certain group. So the Kim character didn't work for me at all, and that scene was so unnecessary to show her milk coming from her nipples and sex with York. You could have did something more creative than that scene. But time for... This show is like a poor man's early seasons of Walking Dead. We get a war, ladies and gentlemen, and what it was like, the stormtroopers shooting, I mean, the lack of aim, and again, I know these women aren't like soldiers or assassins, but just seeing this scene play out was just so ridiculous to me. Roxanne and her crew arrive to the Utopia. They think they have the advantage. They're ambushed, and this is where we see the gun shooting, and again, they literally are in the center of the town. We see the head of the Utopia, get their women in place, and they literally are right there to be killed, but they can't shoot. And again, I know they're not target practices, but it's just like, come on. But we move on, and I think this is like the best scene of not only this episode, but probably the entire series. York and his sister finally meet. We see them in the field. This is where she briefly gets shot by Sonia. This is when Sonia gets shot in the head by the one girl. We see Hero kills her, but we get the conversation. And I felt the moment, even though we haven't really spent any but flashbacks with York and Hero in the first episode when we had the events before everything went down. But I felt at that moment between the brother and sister. It was very short, unfortunately, but it was the most strongest emotional moment of the episode. And like I said, probably the entire season. But she warns him about Roxanne, about the Amazons. Like, I can't even take the Amazonian, like them calling them Amazons is just so funny to me. Like, they're 0% warriors, they're 0% badasses in my opinion. But the Amazons are coming for you, York. Get out of here or I'm going to have to shoot you. Which again, I talked about this many weeks ago, that was going to probably be the scene that they're going to see each other. She's going to have to choose which side she wants to lean on. And obviously she picked her side. But I thought that again, emotionally, I kind of felt it, even though it was not really that developed. I think the acting probably sold it more so than the actual story that was given to us. But leave it to the show to give one task, give like an unreasonable task to Nora, as she's just like, okay, we surrender. And everyone, apparently, remember, this is a gun. Everyone's shooting. I mean, we got rifles, we got handguns, but everyone can hear her. She's just like, I surrender, and not pop her in the head with a gun. But she's like, I can surrender. And then everyone else is like, okay, we're done. Okay, this is, we've lost some people, this, that, and the other. And what I thought was so stupid, we see Roxanne freaking out, throwing tables. She's pissed about surrendering. And I'm thinking, okay, they're going to be captured. They're going to put them in the jail cells because they don't want them to regroup and come back and take over their town. Nope. They just go about their way. They go back to their little pool house and they're just having this conversation. I thought that was the stupidest moment of this entire show. That they just had the Utopia leader, the fake leader. She's lost women on her side. Roxanne's lost women and all that stuff. But they just part ways and just go about their business. I thought that was just so stupid in my opinion. But let's move on. As we get this conversation here with Roxanne, and we have Nora having a conversation about vowing to be the women they want to be. And we'll talk about the scene where Roxanne bites the dust. But let me roll back and rewind a little bit. For the first time all season, 355 and York are on the same page, and they have like a genuinely honest moment with each other as York is under the impression that his mom died, and this is where 355 talks about her losing her family and how she was able to fight back and be the person she came to be, and they're going to end up sticking together. He wants to learn from her before he can fend for himself and all that stuff. So again, an honest conversation, a conversation that should have happened weeks ago, and they've been building to this as far as them having this bond of a certain extent, but yeah, we get the moment between us two, but now less in the episode. As I mentioned, we have the conversation between Roxanne about you're a coward, you surrendered, and we hear Nora give her backstory about her real name being Victoria, how she's claiming her name, how she's claiming to be the woman, how she claims to wants to take over the world, how she wants these Amazonians to be who they should be. She kills Roxanne, and that just felt so hollow. But let's wrap up this show here as we end with Fran and the other agent that we saw from weeks ago, who was all in the work. She was working with her the whole time. They captured Brown and Sam and Jess, and this is where we get 355, York and Allison. They know that they have all the stuff they need to get where they need to go, which is to meet Fran and her group, and we end with them on the road making their way to Fran. And as you all notice, very creative, like the very first episode, the road is a sign of a Y, which is obviously Y, the last man. So that's the finale. As the finale goes, again, there were the moment with Hero and York. I felt the moment with York in 355 was a solid, honest moment, but everything else, from the milk boobs leaking sex scene to the Roxanne, the Amazons, and the gunfights and the stormtroopers missing every shot and people dying left and right, and I could care less. This show, and that just brings me to my overall thoughts of the show. I've heard from a lot of people that have read the graphic novel that this isn't the best adaptation. A lot of people that have been waiting for this adaptation have been, really disappointed. And I don't come from that perspective because I never read the graphic novel, like I said in my first review. But as a show goes, I thought that the show had a lot of potential. I thought that the show could have been a Walking Dead type of theme in regards to different groups, people wanting to carry on with the world and try to get things back to normal. Some people thriving, which we got some of that, but it's just the execution and the performances by a Roxanne, the performances by a Kim and a Regina, and the lack of interest. And whenever we would alternate episodes where one episode would be York in the Pentagon, the next episode will be straight Roxanne and Nora and Hero, and we go back and forth and back and forth. And it's just like a roller coaster. Like, oh, the stuff with York and 355 is interesting in the Pentagon, and which, if I'm being honest, I love Diane Lane. She's the best actress in this entire show. But whenever we would cut to that stuff, when you see the resolve, it really didn't have a good payoff to me. So it makes all those scenes feel wasted to get to that, where we end with that particular storyline. And again, I mentioned it weeks ago, the Roxanne group Amazon stuff was by far the weakest stuff of this show. Like I said, from a writing perspective, an acting perspective, a story perspective, it was just weak. And I think that just kind of overall sums up my thoughts of the show. It's just a poorly written show. It really didn't have that much of a direction. It relied so heavily on, okay, we're going to slowly build this world, which again, we only spent time in Washington, D.C., whatever Roxanne and her people were. It seemed like they were somewhere in the South, which, by the way, again, Sam finding President Brown was just so silly to me. But we're there, and then we're spending time with York on his way to Pennsylvania. It's like this is a global event, but yet we just felt so confined. I felt like this show didn't have the reins to really explore the state of the world after this catastrophic event that went down. So I just felt like it felt held back. It felt like it didn't have much of a direction. It didn't feel like it really knew what it wanted to be. And I'm not a person that really has a lot to say politically speaking on this channel, but I do feel like the message and the politics definitely overshadowed the progression of the show. I feel like it really played its hand. It really let you know as an audience how they feel about politics and Democrats and Republicans, and what side of the line they lay on, and that's fine. Everything, and I know some people are like, shows and movies shouldn't have politics or message in it, but if you look at it, everything has a message in it, right? It's just a matter of if you agree with that message or not. And not saying that was one of the reasons why I didn't like the message. It was just like I feel like it overshadowed the narrative of the show, which is just my personal opinion. So overall, as far as the season 2 goes and finding a new place, And not to sound blunt or rash or mean about it, but if they can find a new home, I hope they can find a new director, a new writer. And I know that this show opened up so many opportunities for women of color, the LGBTQ community, which is incredibly awesome. And I want that continuation if they do get a season 2. But let's maybe get some different people in behind the chair, women that have more experiences with handling shows like this and, you know, things of that nature. And again, I don't want to bash the people that made this. I just don't feel like they were the best creators for this content, in my personal opinion. So if they were to get a season 2, you know, HBO seems like a good platform. I mentioned Apple TV Plus would probably be a good platform for them, or even Amazon, but we'll see what comes of it. That's my thoughts on the last 2 episodes, on the show, on where it can land, but I want to know your thoughts. If you all stuck around to watch my reviews every single week, I appreciate you all. I really want this show to be great, but unfortunately, I think that it just wasn't. It was just a very mediocre show at best. But hey, that's just my thoughts. Let me know your pros, your cons. Where do you want the show to go next? Do you want to continue? Let's talk about it in the comments. Thank you for watching this review. Before you all leave, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that bell. That way you don't miss any of my other future reviews. Hope you all are staying safe. Happy November 1st to you all out there. As you all can see on the screen now, subscribe to my channel. Check out my other content, and we'll see you in the next video.